Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud. I have a very, very special guest for the show here today. Can you go ahead and announce to the world who you are and where you're calling from?
For sure. Thanks for having me, Kimberly. My name is Chang. I'm based in Vancouver, BC, Canada. And my background is mostly in startup advisory. So I work with early stage companies, helping them with getting the idea off the ground through to launching the business and then growing and scaling through sales.
Okay, well said. And can you tell me a little bit, whatever you would like to talk about, speak from the heart about your past, your challenges leading up into your present?
Sure. I guess I come from originally from Malaysia, a very conservative Asian family and background. Growing up, I've always wanted to go into business because I was inspired by many of the business books that I got to read, like Rich Dad Poor Dad, Steve Jobs, looking up to all these sort of business idols. And my parents, being very traditional Asian parents, always pushed me into more of the educational route, saying, "Oh, you should be a doctor, you should be a lawyer because you're smart." So that was kind of the background. And they were always saying, business, you can figure it out on your own. You don't have to get a degree for this. To an extent, I would say their advice has been somewhat true. But I would say that if had I gone into business earlier, I would have probably shortened my journey quite a bit. But yeah, that's kind of how I started getting into business. And then I graduated from university with a BSc in psychology, decided that research wasn't quite for me, ended up going into business. And I figured out, hey, if I'm going to do business and I don't have any business skills, the best place to probably start is to learn how to sell. Because once you learn how to sell, you can communicate with people, you learn how to negotiate, you learn how to be persuasive. And that helps not only with selling to your customers, but also to pitch to investors when it comes to recruiting team members or even just, you know, getting your idea out there. So that's kind of how I ended up starting my journey. Ran my first business back in 2011, back when the iPhone 1 was the new thing back in the day. Uh, Made a lot of mistakes. Ended up didn't going. We didn't end up
Hold
going
up,
anywhere
hold
with
up.
that.
I have to take up an Apple. So it was Apple 1. I thought it started at Apple 4.
Sorry, it might have been the iPhone 3, not the iPhone 4. There was a
Okay,
3 before the 4. Yeah,
you
yeah,
could go and continue.
and I was building an app. And if you're curious what the app was, it was basically an app that would help you figure out what dish to order in a restaurant. So you have the Yelps, the Google reviews that help you figure out which restaurant to go to. And then the challenge I found is that when you get to the restaurant, you have to read all the reviews to figure out what's the best dish. So me and a bunch of friends, we ended up starting this business to try to create an app where you could rank dishes, you could take pictures of your dish, and then that would help people figure out what's the right thing to order. And we ended up spending probably close to half a year on the project. Made a lot of mistakes. Ended up launching it, and consumers seemed to like it, but we couldn't get any restaurants to pay us for it, so we couldn't monetize it. So we ended up shutting down the business after 6 months and went back into a corporate job and worked there for about another 2 years, and then started my second company after that. But yeah, maybe I'll make some room if you have any questions about that before I jump into the rest of the story.
Okay, thank you. Well said. What was one of your medium mistakes that you made on your program? Because that sound like an awesome idea. That's like the Facebook of trying to figure out what you want to eat. You're identifying something that we cook and we relate to and we have to eat every day. So that is an awesome idea that I would still rebuild that idea on something else. That is not a dumb idea.
I would say three main lessons from that. So number one would be we didn't pay enough attention to understanding the difference between a user and a customer. So what I
Mm,
mean by that is the general consumer, me and you, who would use the app to find a dish, we are the users, but we were trying to monetize off the restaurants, i.e., them being the customers of us, and we didn't understand what restaurants wanted. So if restaurants weren't clear about understanding how our app could actually help drive more traffic, they weren't willing to pay us anything for it. So making sure that you understand what your customers want and building some value for your customer into your product, that's one big mistake that we made. The second big one would be probably the team. A lot of us were passionate about food, but at the same time, we weren't passionate enough to understand or be patient enough to wait this out in the long run. Like this would be a business that would probably take about 2 to 5 years before it could become profitable. And we none of us had the patience for that. We all needed to be able to make some income right away. So then because there wasn't that expectation and alignment at the start, the team ended up falling apart. And then the third one is probably around software development. Probably the best analogy to put this into is you can't make a baby with 9 women in 1 month. So more
Go ahead.
yeah, it doesn't mean that it's going to be built more quickly.
Okay, so my next question for you, wow, well said. With the technology you use, do you think that in the future maybe that you can use a type of hardware software program that you specifically geared towards any type of artificial intelligence? Because you have to think somebody is going to come around and say that that was a wonderful idea, and then they're going to see exactly reverse what you did. And instead of having somebody come in and reverse what you did, whether it was wrong or right, and try to make it into their own positive light, which I don't think that's right what people do. I figure maybe one day you can build on that project in the future. If you don't want to, that's fine. But that is that. I'm not gonna lie, and I'm not sucking up. That was a wonderful idea because people don't know how powerful that food really is. You know, food is the window to the soul. It's a part of you. You know, and if you can, I have an idea. You know, maybe in the future you can probably put in some you can have an artificial intelligence that actually read everything that's in the ingredients as it is, just like they can read our heartbeat, just like they can read different things, read the ingredients that's in there, and that'll make them wonder, well, if this has whey protein in it and if this has bee pollen in it, then maybe, you know, and whatever else ingredients they allow us to know, except for the secret ingredients, that this may be a
Mhm.
good idea. You know, what is your input on that?
I would say it is definitely possible with the amount of data that's available right now. Um, Whether or not I'm the one who executes on this, that's a different story. I would say that I still like you. I think it's a good idea as well. Though I would say that my passions have shifted and have changed. Now I'm mostly passionate about helping people with personal development, helping them grow themselves, learn more about what they are passionate about, learn more about their personal values. That's where I get my excitement from. The food stuff and the tech stuff, I would say it's a means to an end. So it's an interesting journey and an interesting idea that you could actually take to market. And if anyone wants to do it, by all means, go ahead. But I would say it's not for me.
Understood. And tell me more about your programming, your professional business geared towards helping people adjust to their everyday lives. I mean, obviously that's what you do that, right?
Yes and no. So to kind
Okay.
of continue the story, after I went back into corporate for 2 years, I ended up trying to start my second business, and that's actually where and how I got into the startup scene. So I ended up saying, hey, if I want to try to help other people with running their own businesses, who am I to teach people when I don't have any experience myself? So I ended up joining a social venture incubator accelerator. So for those of you who are not familiar with a social venture, it's basically a business that is not only purely for profit, but I think the premise behind a social venture is uh, people, planet, and purpose. So doing something better with the business where it's like maybe you are using sustainable packaging where it's helpful for the environment, or where you're designing a solution for mental wellness, or maybe it's advocating for social justice, things like that, where you're using business while you're, yes, making profit, but also at the same time doing something, creating some greater good with your business. So that's the idea behind a social venture. And I worked for that incubator for about 7 years. And through that journey, I really started to realize that most of the entrepreneur or the business people that I've met, those that tend to persevere with the ideas, are usually the ones who are in it not just purely for opportunity, not just there for the money, but actually trying to do something greater because maybe they've personally felt a certain pain in their life, and they decide, okay, I'm going to create a solution for that pain. Therefore, I'm going to start a business around it. Those are usually the ones that I find have the grit to stay around long enough to actually see the idea evolve to a point where it actually becomes feasible and profitable. So yeah, that's kind of what drives me. And then I ended up leaving that incubator accelerator, and I started my own business. The premise of my own business is primarily to help people develop these sort of soft skills through entrepreneurship. That's kind of the end goal. But what I'm doing right now, because I'm also in a transitionary period in my life where I just had a second child. He's 9 months old now, and I also have a 4 year old as well. So a lot of the things that I want to do, I can't quite do yet because of how I need to be at home looking after the kids with my wife. So in the meantime, I'm mostly focusing on sales consulting. So I work with companies, I help them with sales, which is my specialty. So sales training, sales techniques, but also the sales operation side of things, building processes, building automation, using the right CRM, those kind of things.
Oh wow. So um why do they call it I can see that you're into computers, so why would they call it motherboards? This is just an off the wall question. Why do they call it the main core processor, the main processor to the computer, the motherboard? Or maybe they didn't call this some new stuff. I don't know, but I just have to know for my own personal reasons.
I'm not that techy, so I probably don't have a clear answer for that. But it's probably
Oh,
because that's the main board where most of the functions and most of the hardware sits.
understood. And tell me, where are you going in the future with all this knowledge you know?
Yeah, and I would say probably in the short term is to continue doing what I'm doing around startup and business consulting and also sales. But in the longer run, once I can start to get back into more in-person events, once I have more stability around my schedule, then I want to move back into running. I used to run mastermind groups, and it's basically an idea where you bring together fellow peers, fellow entrepreneurs that are all around the same stage, the same kind of journey,
Yeah.
and you work together and you help each other with moving to that next level. So that's what I really enjoyed facilitating and running. And I found that experience to be very rewarding and very enriching. So I hope to eventually get back to that.
And if you were to give a piece of advice to, because I have some people watching right now, if you were to give a piece of advice to a entrepreneur out there that wants to be a sales consultant, wants to be in business, see that you went through stuff, and it's not too late, what would you tell them?
Um, Probably the first piece of advice is not to overthink it. A lot of people tend to overplan, try to be perfect, but at the end of the day, execution is king. As long as you're willing to hustle, willing to take action, that will be the first step, right? You don't have to be different from all your competitors on day one. But if you're willing to take action, you can eventually change, you can eventually shift, you can eventually differentiate yourself in the market as well. But that doesn't begin until you start to execute. So take action. Yeah.
Thank you. And if let's see, what can you, during your psychology career or your psychology education, getting your bachelor's degree, what would you say your favorite class was, Rwanda? Because it's you got less than 1 minute to explain, or if you go over, we're fine. I just want to make sure I'm on your time.
Hmm. Personally, my favorite class was probably the one around behavioral psychology. So understanding how people behave in different circumstances and situations and how the social interactions affect how we behave. Yeah, that was definitely an interesting one.
Okay. Is there anything you would like to tell the audience? Like if there's, if you have anything that you would like to share or anything for 1 minute, and then I'll close with how the people can reach you.
Sure. Probably I would say is there's a lot of stuff that most people don't see behind the scenes when it comes to a success story of anyone, of an entrepreneur, of a celebrity, of an influencer. Um, and we often don't see some of the messy things that happen behind the scenes, but be aware that they do happen. There are a lot of challenges that everyone has to work through, whether or not you come from a position of privilege or not. So go out there, seek advice, find a mentor, find advisors. That is the best place to start.
And lastly, how can the people reach you?
Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can search up my name, Chin Hing Chang, ChinHingChang. That's probably the easiest way.
Okay. You stay on the line. Thank you everyone. Take care. You definitely take care and stay on the line. Thank you.